Good afternoon. Welcome to our enforcement training series. Today's topic is extent of condition. My name is Maylay Cook, and I am a WECC training and outreach specialist. Let's start off today with a few announcements. First, next Thursday, February 16th, is our Reliability and Security Oversight Monthly Update. We will have a presentation by California ISO and WECC on their Align audit experience, as well as a presentation on the Reliability and Security Indicator Dashboard. A link to this meeting is provided in the chat. Next up, we have our Resource Adequacy Discussion Series on March 2nd at 10 a.m. This series discusses challenges, explores issues, and shares perspectives about WECC's resource adequacy work. The link for further information on this discussion series is in the chat. Our next announcement is the WECC Board of Directors and associated meetings. These will be held in a hybrid format on March 7th and 8th, and we also have a link for more information about these meetings in the chat. And last but not least is our Spring Reliability and Security Workshop. This will be held virtually on March 21st. The registration is now open, and we will share the link for that in the chat, and we hope to see you there. Our antitrust policy. All WECC meetings are conducted in accordance with the WECC Antitrust Policy and the NERC Antitrust Compliance Guidelines. All participants must comply with the policy and guidelines. This meeting is public. Confidential or proprietary information should not be discussed in open session. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly. By participating, you give your consent for your name, voice, image, and likeness to be included in that recording. WECC strives to ensure the information presented today is accurate and reflects the views of WECC. However, all interpretations and positions are subject to change. If you have any questions, please contact WECC's legal counsel. We will be taking questions at the end of today's session. You can send those questions via chat to WECC meetings. At the end, we'll also let you use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask your question directly. All right, today we are talking about performing extent of condition. Members of WECC's enforcement team will walk us through conducting a proper extent of condition analysis as it relates to a noncompliance with electric reliability standards for the U.S. and British Columbia areas of the Western Interconnection. Today's presentation will focus on the following topics: the what, why, when, who, and how of how to perform an extent of condition analysis, as well as reporting that extent of condition in Align, and some other general expectations and guidelines. Before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to thank NERC, Texas RE, and CERC for sharing their training documents with us. The training we're offering today is built upon a foundation that they provided to us, and WECC is grateful for their assistance. I will now turn the time over to David Vitkus to take it away.
Hello, my name is David Vitkus. I'm a senior enforcement engineer at WECC. And today I'd like to talk to you about what is an extent of condition analysis, or it's often referred to as an EOC for short. An extent of condition, or EOC, is generally defined as a generic implication of a failure, malfunction, deficiency, defective item, weakness, or problem, i.e., the actual or potential applicability for an event or condition to exist in other activities, projects, programs, facilities, or organizations. Put another way, an EOC can be thought of as the extent to which a failure may have impacted people, processes, or technologies beyond what you've already discovered in your initial root cause and PNC discovery. The use of an extended condition evaluation it's a critical component in our mutual goal to mitigate threats and risks to reliability in the BES. Next slide, please. So it's useful to reframe the concept of an extended condition as something that you can commonly experience in everyday life. You know, in this case, strawberries. If you have a basket of strawberries with a little bit of mold on top, you have to ask yourself the question, you know, has the mold made its way through other strawberries in the box? How far has this situation gone? What about the other box you might have in the refrigerator? What about the strawberries in the freezer? So do you just throw it out, eat it, wash them? What do you do? And your refrigerator is your business. But when we're talking about the BES, the implications of a particular problem existing elsewhere is really important when we're talking about PNCs and risk analysis. So next slide, please. So the importance of EOC to registered entities to you. An effective EOC helps you identify all related noncompliance across the enterprise. So trends in weaknesses or strengths in your processes and procedures. And most effective programs use pre-established communication plans to let everybody know how to share the documented data and issues. And you want to confirm the true cause and inform your team members of mitigation efforts and how those efforts align with your root causes. And that's not necessarily discussing, the overall root cause analysis across your program. It's more about keeping everybody informed of what's gone wrong and where they might look to help inform your mitigation efforts. And, along those lines, use that information to ensure complete mitigation and prevent recurrence going forward. Next slide, please. Some extended conditions evaluations may only require a review of documents, while others require, a walkthrough of a facility, or perhaps re-execution of your processes to make sure that you really understand where the failure might have affected other systems. And when you're running through these EOC analyses, try to avoid a checklist mentality. Think outside the box and consider where this particular condition might have impacted other people's processes or technologies. And it's important to remember that you really want to rely very heavily on your subject matter experts, the people who are most aware of the capabilities of your technology, the application of those processes when you're going through these reviews. And, as an example, if you've had a failure in a change control process, you want to talk to the people who are familiar with that process, and also those technologies or systems that process was being used against during the time of non-compliance. So involving your subject matter experts at a grassroots level becomes particularly important. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a nice visual of what we're talking about when we're really considering what an extended condition looks like. You discover your initial non-compliance in the lower left-hand corner. But the extended condition review is really considering all the possible non-compliances elsewhere, noted on the lower right-hand side. Next slide, please. So your extended condition is really part of your mitigation process, because your extended condition lets you know where else this problem has created non-compliance for you and potential risk. So once you understand your extended condition, it's easier to come up with your mitigation activities or develop your mitigation plan based on what you know. And you won't really get a comprehensive mitigation plan if you don't understand your EOC. So it's really a prerequisite to effective mitigations. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much. Yvonne?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Good afternoon. My name is Yvonne McMacken, and I'm an enforcement engineer here at WECC. And today I'll be discussing when and whom should perform an EOC analysis. I'll also share a few facts and a myth with you. We all know some assets are more impactful to the reliability than others, and we have various delegations of standard applicability. Some issues will be self-evident candidates for an EOC analysis at the inception of problem identification. Others may not be logical candidates until an analysis is underway. Occasionally, the need for an evaluation might not be clear until the corrective action plan has begun. It's important to maintain an inquiring mind throughout the process and avoid a checklist mentality. This means that the EOC evaluation, root cause, and corrective actions should be considered throughout the process. Every time a noncompliance is identified, an EOC evaluation should be performed. When organizations put a priority on identifying the EOC in the early data gathering phase of an incident or violation identification, they stand a much better chance of mitigating the problem the first time. Consideration of an EOC evaluation should be captured as part of each corrective action management plan. There should be criteria for determining when a formal evaluation is required and when an informal review may be acceptable. For example, a company may require a formal determination of an EOC evaluation for matters that are reported to its non-compliance tracking system. A further example of a candidate for a formal EOC evaluation consideration would include repetitive or programmatic issues. The breadth of the evaluation should be driven by the potential safety impact and probability occurrence as appropriate. The evaluation can be narrow or broad, depending if the issue is unique or potentially transcends organizational boundaries. Next slide, please. So, who should perform an EOC evaluation? EOCs should be performed by the appropriate SME or SMEs or personnel who have best understanding of the issue needing evaluation. This made me think back to when I was a compliance coordinator at a utility several years ago. We had a complex vegetation issue take place, and I knew that I did not have the expertise at the time to write the EOC alone, and that I would need to reach out to our Fact 3 SME, who was always very, very busy, and ask for help. So at the end of the day, or during the evaluations, you need skilled individuals who have expertise with the issue at hand and understand what is needed to complete the evaluation. So sometimes we have to ask for help. EOCs might be extra challenging when situations come up for small entities who may not have the in-house knowledge to perform an EOC. This could be a time to consider reaching out to fellow entities, WECC, or the WECC enforcement team for guidance. And I know our email information is, I believe it's in the last slide, so you'll have that. Individuals assigned to tasks reviewing, critiquing, and investigating non-compliance matters should have initial responsibility for making determination of the span of the EOC evaluation. There may be different individuals that are more familiar within the areas of your organization to start the evaluation versus one person always being tasked with initiating the evaluation. Next slide, please. All right, so a little more about who should perform EOCs. Individuals that have EOC responsibilities should be trained similarly on how to perform EOC evaluations, so there is a uniform approach to these. Having a consistent process that everyone is similar with and familiar with and have been trained could jump in and help. And this creates a depth for coverage for evaluations to move forward when the unexpected happens. A shared work folder that everyone has access to is also beneficial. I believe that consistency is really key here. Individuals with a solid toolbox is necessary to understand the corrective actions needed to resolve issues at the site or in other areas of your organization. Some EOCs will require additional knowledge, so bring in extra personnel when needed. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's our myth and fact. So we kind of started to think what would be a myth maybe out there with the entities, and we believe that this could be a real myth that has taken place, that an EOC must be complete prior to submitting a self-report. And that is not the case. Please submit your self-reports right away. That's really a key takeaway from this slide that I want you to remember. So facts. EOC should be conducted after immediate non-compliance has been managed and the mitigation plans are being established. If the EOC is not complete when the self-report is submitted, which we know is okay, please document the mitigation activities for the EOC with your anticipated completion date. WECC may ask for additional information about the EOC methodology and results if not provided in a line. We will discuss this further later in the presentation. And that's all I've got. I'm going to pass you over to Trent now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trent Wilson. I'm a senior mitigation engineer, enforcement engineer here at WECC. Today, I'll be talking about how to perform an extent of condition. There are interrelationships between EOC, causal analysis, and corrective actions. You will see in the next slides that I go over how these are interrelated. The first step in performing an EOC is determining the cause of the issue. Knowing the cause helps provide more information for the EOC analysis. Situations might not be discovered until a cause analysis has started or is complete.
Trent, could we ask you to speak up just a little bit louder or a little closer to your mic? Thank you.
The decision on how to conduct an EOC will be tailored to the facts and circumstances of the issue. A robust and active management system could use assessment, issue management, cause analysis, and EOC evaluation as a way to understand what is happening at the activity level, facility, or program level. Identifying and correcting these issues and deficiencies will reduce risk and operating costs and result in a more reliable BPS. Situations might not be discovered until a cause analysis has started or is complete. The EOC analysis process does not stand alone. Rather, it's actually a key element in the overall continuous improvement cycle and analysis. And the EOC may contribute to the cause analysis by confirming an underlying programmatic issue, and then corrective actions can be implemented. Next. All right, so we'll talk about what to do before getting started. I will start here on the left side. So do you have an existing EOC method and approach? You could use and improve what you actually already have. If not, you should start by establishing EOC processes, procedures, communication plans, forms. If you do not have a method, creating one will assist in the EOC analysis. These next two items do go together. So how do you conduct, document, share, and retain the analysis, and know how you plan to conduct the EOC and document the results? These two items are important to complete, as you can refer to the analysis and use those results that you've gathered at a later time. WECC may ask for methods or processes you use to complete the EOC, including documents, communications, results. WECC first starts by understanding if you did complete an extent of condition. And now to the right side, communication. You can identify how you will communicate and track EOC actions. And does everyone within the organization clearly understand expectations for execution and timing? There may be a project plan that you can use. Are there identified single points of contact in all business units that you can get in touch with, or maybe even a group? Next. All right, now we'll go over key questions to ask when starting. Have we seen this before? Maybe there was a prior issue with a similar cause and corrective actions. If we are seeing this same issue again, why is that? Did the internal controls we added before not prevent the new issue? Is the management system deficient in some way since the circumstance occurred? These last two are key items. Could other activities and facilities at the site be experiencing the same problem? Maybe there's another issue in a different building at the same location. The issue could be with a different business unit or even at a different facility. The issue may not be limited to one facility or building. It goes back to the strawberries analogy. How many strawberries are in the basket that are bad? Do I have 3 baskets to check? And are the issues there in those others? And to what extent does this problem have an impact or potential impact on reliability? Next. Here's some EOC analysis methods that you can use. You can use precursor historical review by analyzing corrective action. Analyzing related assessment findings is one method. Performance analysis reports, those also help. These help analyze prior similar issues and occurrences. Personnel interviews coupled with document reviews. This ties into the previous slides we've gone over today. Also, performance measures and metrics. Observations of similar work activities and processes. The outcome of EOC reviews at times determine issues in the same type of activities and processes. And you could also use sample testing. Next, please. Now we'll go into determining magnitude of the issue. Be purposeful and thorough in planning and executing. I would say that great planning can lead to great execution. So maybe do more of a heavy lift on the planning side. That will help with the execution. Don't arbitrarily limit the scope to one area. Also look to assess the whole organization and any affiliates. This issue may be more broad. Next. Extent of condition is dependent on compliance. If there is a non-compliance, there may be more somewhere else. Also know why you're excluding items and document that in your methods. Maybe the extent does not need to be that broad. Use sampling where appropriate to identify potential issues. You could sample a certain type of equipment or asset and see if there are any issues with that type. That may make the situation evident that there may or may not be an issue somewhere else. The extended condition may not identify new issues, but at least you did one, and at least you can verify that you did complete one and you did analyze that. Next, please. Extent of condition criteria considerations. So we'll go through a few of these. Causal factors. A key element of the corrective action process is the determination of cause. There's different types of causes that we're aware of, including apparent cause, contributing, direct, or root cause. Direct and apparent cause are really the same. And all of these help identify the EOC required. Understanding the different types of causes is important. I'm now going to provide an example. So here's an example case. In a case where a non-compliance occurred because of failure to maintain a certain type of equipment or asset to current standards, an EOC analysis would look at all similar assets to determine if there are other issues at that site, or the same type of asset may be used at different sites, and we may need to check those. This might lead to a fresh review of assets and equipment, maintenance requirements in general at both sites. So the EOC analysis will contribute to more accurate identification of the underlying issue. Similarly, such a review could indicate that the issue is confined to a single piece of equipment or a single building. This part ties into the uniqueness. If the issue uniquely relates to a single piece of equipment, you could determine all sites that may have that same type of equipment. If, however, the source of the failure is programmatic, the EOC review may be across multiple facilities, and it would be appropriate to complete a more broad analysis. Also consider every site, a piece of equipment, asset, or process that could be at issue. And for the recurrence, is the EOC associated with a prior issue and the same cause that has occurred in the past? Something to look at. Next. As you go through the EOC review, consider seriousness also. Factors to consider include the potential for physical harm, environmental impact, public perception, regulatory and contractual performance requirements. Also, high impact facilities should also receive high importance in determining that EOC and implementing corrective actions. Matters involving multiple failures or issues would make evaluation very appropriate. Also, cost. Managers may make decisions regarding an EOC analysis using the gridded approach. It takes the cost into consideration. This ties back to the sampling method. A sample is maybe all that's needed. Next. We'll now go over the apparent cause determination. We'll discuss how causes play into this, how they play a key role into that EOC review. So apparent cause is the first cause in a Y staircase. Apparent cause is not the root cause. What you want to do is don't arbitrarily limit the EOC analysis to apparent cause. You may miss a potential issue or reliability and security risk if the root cause is not determined. Did you account for entire organization's processes, facilities, or assets? Here's why it's important to determine the apparent cause and the root cause. I'm going to provide an example. Let's say you have a process that you use to meet compliance for equipment, and that process is outdated. That is the apparent cause, that it's outdated. We know we need to address the process and assets or equipment associated with that process. And then on the other hand, you can determine the root cause when asking additional whys. You may determine that the process team did not update that process as well as other processes. When we think about the extended condition, that tells us there may be other processes that may be outdated. So this means there may be issues with other equipment or assets and processes across the organization. The EOC could be limited to one process or could be broader and include multiple processes. It just really depends on what the cause is. Next. We'll now discuss root cause determination. You'll see how this is a bit different than the apparent cause determination. So these are some important items that relate to EOC also. What you want to do with a root cause determination when you do that is use a 5-way staircase, or you can use other types of root cause analysis. Whatever method helps you get to the root cause. Keep asking the why until you cannot go any further. The final answer to the final why is the root cause. You may determine there is more than one cause or that there are contributing causes. What you want to do is ensure that EOC and mitigation addresses each type of cause. So you may be addressing the apparent cause and the root cause. This goes back to the previous slide where the root cause was found, which helps us determine there may have been more extended condition. The extended condition may have been more broad. WECC sees PNCs where determining the root cause actually did identify additional extent of condition. Being able to identify the complete EOC will substantially reduce the amount of future issues. And WECC will present a cause training next month and go into that in more detail. All right, we have one more slide and then we have a few summary slides. Next. All right, we will talk about extended condition considerations. We'll go ahead and start here on the left side. Some of these tie into previous slides. So it's important to look for similar issues and conditions in other areas of your organization, like discussed previously. Also account for all processes used to meet business and compliance. We touched on that just a little bit ago. Also look for other manifestations of the causes in other areas, other sites, or the same site. Also anticipate additional issues based on the identified issue and cause. There may or may not be something additional. Reviewing prior implementation applications of the deficient process procedure system to see if earlier deficiencies have gone unnoticed or changed. And now we'll look at the right side here, analysis verification. So you'll want to do a double or even triple check that all processes, devices were accounted for in a review to determine the extent of the issue. Another thing you can do is ensure you have all of your analysis documentation to refer to later. Next. All right, we are now to the EOC Summary. The following steps should be considered and incorporated into the EOC analysis as appropriate. You want to review the background and circumstances that led to the identification of the issue or condition triggering the review. There may be multiple issues or conditions that should be evaluated. Also ensure the level of effort will help identify all relevant causal factors, root cause, apparent cause, whatever it may be. Also evaluate the issue or condition for uniqueness, recurrence, and potential or actual impacts. Next. Also determine what issues require follow-up and whether a SME needs to be used in the evaluation. WECC recommends a team be involved in the analysis and documentation, not just one person. So a SME, manager, multiple people involved in a team. Consider what might have been inadequate in previous assessments, investigations, critique results, and cause determinations if this is a repetitive problem. So these points are why it's important to have a documented EOC analysis and method that you can refer to later or refer back to at a later time. You'll also want to identify and investigate the extent of applicability to other activities, processes, equipment, facilities, organizations. Also ensure involvement by both the appropriate subject matter expert teams, managers in the development of findings. Multiple personnel may have in-depth knowledge of that area rather than just one person. I also want to document such findings. The problem-solving loop might require going back to the prior corrective actions for similar issues. Next. And the final summary, you can account for all processes used to meet compliance, and sometimes the EOC review may involve multiple processes and devices at facilities. EOC is really summed up as how many issues are there based on a cause, and the EOC may not be limited to one area. A properly scoped, implemented, and documented EOC analysis, it can also help identify and correct problems before they become events. This will save entities and WECC resources, time to spend on other activities to ensure a more reliable bulk electric system. Thank you, everyone. And now I'll hand it off to Maylee.
Thank you, Trent. I'm going to talk for a few minutes with you about reporting your extent of condition in a line. Next slide. If known, your EOC can be reported right on the self-report. To do this, when you get to the extent of condition and root cause section, select yes from the drop-down. That will open the description box where you can then enter the description of your EOC, the items, the devices, and assets that apply. Next. However, as we learned from Yvonne, you do not need to wait to submit your self-report before you do not need to wait on your EOC to submit your self-report. So if you answered no or in progress on your self-report, you are able to provide the extent of condition details later. This is one of the ways by providing a finding update. When you are in your enforcement processing section of a line, you will go to the column Send Update after you've located the appropriate item. Click that plus sign. You'll get a form very similar to the self-report form where you can then provide the extent of condition details. Next, please. It is possible that WECC may reach out to you through a request for information asking you to provide the extent of condition information. If that occurs, You will see the RFI in your My Tasks. When you log into Align, you would open that item and fill out the form. Any evidence you had to provide would go in the secure evidence locker. You would just fill that out and submit. And let's go to the next slide. Last, you can also provide us your extent of condition information as a mitigation milestone. You can, when you're in the mitigation record, create a new milestone, fill out the form, outlining the plans to complete your EOC, update and submit as part of your mitigation. Next. For further information on working with Align and how to actually click each of those, all the appropriate buttons in those steps, NERC has created some excellent resources that we have linked here in this presentation, which is available on the calendar item for this event. So all of those are available to you. We have items for self-reports, finding updates, and if we go to the next slide, we have similar information for the RFI response and the mitigation milestones. We'll now turn the time over for Michael to finish this up.
Thank you, Maylee. I'm back to talk to you about, now that you've learned all about extent of condition and performing the work and reporting it from the registered entity side, I would like to talk to you about our general expectations and guidelines from WECC side. First, although it was previously mentioned, I wanted to go over one more time that the first step in the extent of condition, the first is always report the non-compliance first, if you have that opportunity, and tell us as much as you can, even if the work isn't done. You begin the execution of the extent of condition after the non-compliance has been stabilized. So report, then you can begin the EOC. If you happen to do it first and it's a quick one, you can let us know in the self-report, that'd be great. And then provide WECC updated extent of condition details as they become available. So as you finish your EOC or you reach a milestone in your EOC, as Maylee just explained on some of those Align pages, you can go in and update the extent of condition description so that our engineers have access to that. So those are your first three steps. Next slide, please. In the self-report, please detail as much of the extent of condition as you can. As I mentioned on the previous slide, you may not have all of them at the time of self-report, but you can tell us where you're at. You can tell us if you've initiated it, formed a team, if you've contacted other people. Whatever you can tell us will help us move down a little bit further down the road and speed the processing of the non-compliance. If the extent of condition is complete upon submission of the self-report, then please identify and detail all instances of potential non-compliance in the self-report and describe the relevant extent of condition method details upon submission in the self-report if available at that time. WECC may need to see evidence supporting the EOC method or summary of results, that kind of thing. We would issue an RFI to get those if you don't submit them upon updating the system. Next slide, please. So what if there are changes after you submit the self-report? I was kind of covering that in the previous slide, but again, you can go into Align and you can update everything that was in the self-report. You can update the extent of condition, you can update the cause, and do those things and complete it after the submitting of the self-report. So please don't let the determination of those factors delay your submittal of the self-report. Next slide, please. When the root cause determination changes, additional instances of noncompliance are identified, or mitigating activity changes, contact the WECC assigned enforcement engineer to determine how a line will be updated. If you don't know who that is, frankly, you can just contact me by email, Michael Dalebout, or if you know who your account manager or your the attorney assigned to your company's cases are, you can contact them if you haven't already heard from the engineer. In the completed extent of condition, share with WECC. The entity will have identified the scope, but not necessarily all reportable instances of non-compliance. We get that. Some instances may be identified during the mitigating activities required submission of additional aligned findings down the road. That's fine. We understand that. As you go out and mitigation plans occur, you may find more instances of the extent of condition. That's naturally how this cycle works. So next slide, please. So from our review perspective, when the review was done, the questions we have to ask ourselves so that we can demonstrate that we have assurance that it was done is we have to be able to answer these questions. How did the entity determine the magnitude of noncompliance? Did the entity assess the entire organization and its affiliates? Were appropriate criteria applied to the analysis? Which methods did the entity use during the extent of condition? And how was the extent of condition verified? On any PNC that requires an extent of condition, the WECC engineer should be comfortable answering these questions so that we can tell later in time whether it was adequate or not. So that's our perspective on that review. Next slide, please. As always, I want to keep people in touch with the documents that are the best source of directions on how to perform any of these steps or the specific requirements of these steps. The best documents and some resources, and Millie mentioned earlier the great training resources NERC has put together, but they also have some really great guides that I would encourage everyone, and have highlighted these in my previous outreach. The Registered Entity Self-Report and Mitigation Plan User Guide is an excellent document that we use in our shop to help guide our activities as well. Next slide. Also, the WECC aligned self-report and mitigation guide that has specific steps that point out how to update things in a line. It's a great desktop reference tool to have available to you. Next slide, please. And finally, the official rulebook of enforcement, the NERC Appendix 4C to the Rules of Procedure. If you're working the enforcement world, that's a pretty good document to have on your desk as well to guide your activities here. So Maylee, I think that is the end of our slides, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Oh, oh yeah, the future enforcement training, but I think that's yours.
I can take that for sure.
Okay.
So we have 2 more of these enforcement trainings planned. The next one will be March 9th, and it will be on root cause, and then also another in April about mitigation through internal controls. So you'll definitely want to put those on your calendar, and we hope to see you there. Let's go to the next slide. Here is the name of all of our presenters for today and the enforcement@wec.org email. You can send questions you might have specific to your entity to that address, or if you have a follow-up question as you think over this, you're welcome to send that there. We do have a few questions that have already come in. The first is, how far back should the entity look when performing an EOC analysis?
You'll really want to take a look back to the start date of the current noncompliance that you do have. That would cover the situation.
Thank you. Okay. Does WECC require an extent of condition and root cause for all self-reports?
Yes, WECC requires information about the cause, also information about the extent of condition that was completed for all self-reports. There are also 2 fields in a line that you would fill out, one for extent of condition, one for cause.
Thank you. And does this also apply for self-logged issues of noncompliance?
Self-logged issues, yes, we would need to know what the cause was. For the extent of condition, we would just want a basic description of what was done to review the extent of condition to determine if there were any additional instances. Just the level of effort isn't as high as it is for higher risk issues.
Okay. What happens if WECC doesn't agree with an entity's root cause? Does WECC issue an RFI or send an email to let entities know?
We may issue an RFI or send an email or request to join a meeting. We may think that there may be a different type of root cause. We may want to discuss that in a meeting so that we can have that dialogue, ask a question, have that answered, and then maybe ask another question. It's more efficient to do that through a meeting rather than an RFI. But we can use any of those options.
But you will communicate with the entity if that occurred.
Yes.
Great. What determines whether an EOC is required?
Really, it's the cause. For every PNC, we do want to know what you did for the extent of condition. To the extent of how much of an extent of condition you do, it really determines on the cause. And if you determine the apparent cause or the root cause, we would really like to know what the root cause is and if you did an extended condition for that root cause. Because if you only provide an apparent cause, WECC may need to come back, have further discussions to find out if there's an additional whys that need to be asked to determine the root cause.
Thank you, Trent. Do we have any other questions? Give it just a moment. I am not seeing any coming in. Thank you so much, WECC Enforcement, David and Michael and Yvonne and Trent. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this for us. And we also, again, want to thank our EOR partners who helped us put this material together. If you could go to the next slide, you can always connect with WECC and engage with us at our LinkedIn or Twitter feeds, and that is at WECC Reliability. Thank you so much for joining us today. This will be posted, the recording and the slides, and you can access that on WECC.org, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.